Welcome back to the Bitcoin Layer. I'm Nik Bhatia. Today we welcome back Stephen Perrenod. He is a PhD in astrophysics, a mathematician, and someone we go to for information about Bitcoin mathematics. Stephen, welcome back.
Thank you, Nik, and congratulations on your next forthcoming book.
Thank you so much. Bitcoin Age, it will be out in February 2025. Stephen, I want to get to Bitcoin's power law. We've had Bitcoin rise to six figures, and I want to check in with you on the mathematics there. But first, let's discuss Google's latest chip, quantum cryptography, and Bitcoin protocol. So can you guide us from the beginning? What did Google announce recently? How is Bitcoin positioned? And what is the future for Bitcoin and quantum computing, please?
Yes, great. And I have some slides prepared for that, Nik. Google in the past week announced a chip with 105 physical qubits. And as we go through this presentation, you'll learn that what really matters is logical qubits. And the number of logical qubits that they can support with that 105 physical qubits is about 1 or 2. So there's a huge difference between physical and logical qubits. And they're going to need of order thousands of logical qubits to break the public-private key pairs that are used for Bitcoin addresses. But there's a lot more color and detail that we'll get into.
As Bitcoin's role in the global financial landscape evolves, understanding its potential impact on your wealth becomes increasingly crucial. Whether we see a measured adoption or accelerated hyper-Bitcoinization, being prepared for various scenarios can make the difference between merely participating and truly optimizing your position. This is why Unchained developed the Bitcoin Calculator, a sophisticated modeling tool that helps you visualize and prepare for multiple Bitcoin futures. Beyond traditional retirement planning, it offers deep insight into how different adoption scenarios could transform your wealth trajectory. What sets this tool apart is that it's integrated with Unchained IRA, the only solution that combines the tax advantages of a retirement account with self-custody of Bitcoin. In any future state, maintaining control of your Bitcoin keys remains fundamental to your Bitcoin strategy. Explore your potential futures at unchained.com/TBL. Don't write your seed on paper. It's estimated that so much Bitcoin is lost forever, and the main culprit, the main reason, is poor seed phrase security. This is why we use StampSeed, a DIY kit that enables you to hammer your seed phrases into titanium plates using professional stamping tools. These plates are heat resistant up to 3,000 degrees, fireproof, crush-proof, and time-proof. They're compact and easy to hide, and they can be used in your single sig or multi-sig setups. Make sure you go check them out today at stampseed.com and use code TBL for 15% off of your order. Okay, Stephen, so let's get into your slide deck titled The Quantum Threat to Bitcoin.
Okay, thank you, Nik. This is something that has been of some interest to me for really 2 decades now. I'm a partner at orionx.net. We're a boutique technology consulting firm based in Silicon Valley, although I'm located in Asia. And our background is in supercomputing and high performance computing. And so we've worked together before at Cray and at Sun. I worked with and reported to the founding partner of orionx.net. So our agenda is first look at the context of quantum computing with high performance computing and supercomputing, and then why are people seeking to build quantum computers and for what sorts of applications? What is the state of the art? What is the rate of progress? And what problem does quantum computing present for Bitcoin in the future and for finance in general? We'll talk a bit about the quantum algorithms of relevance. There are 2 main algorithms, and then solutions and some resources that you can use to track progress in quantum computing with respect to this issue. This next slide applications is about applications of high performance computing. Supercomputing has had an evolution where it started in the 1970s from scalar CPUs and then added at that time vector CPUs. And it's gone on to move to commodity clusters, commodity compute clusters, and then added in recent years the GPU capability that's made them quite powerful from NVIDIA and other vendors. And you see that little box QPU next to the GPU. That's the idea that at some point quantum processors will really be, quantum computing will really be an adjunct to supercomputing, that you'll host it with some traditional supercomputer front end and certain algorithms or core routines you'll put on the quantum processor. So right now, the industry is looking for quantum advantage, and that's going to come from having larger systems with better error correction and better accuracy and better speed while staying within energy constraints. And there, in the third box in the lower section, down on the lower right, there are four main areas of applications. Quantum chemistry and physics, really solving what are quantum problems by using quantum systems. Optimization problems, which is search is a category of that, but more broadly, optimization problems in high dimensionality, and quantum machine learning, and then the one we're most interested in today, cybersecurity. So on slide 5, why quantum computing? This revolves around the difference between a bit and a qubit. So we're all familiar with bits, which are just switches. They can have two states, on or off, 0 or 1. With a qubit, you have a mixture of a pure 0 state or a pure 1 state. This is represented here by this block sphere. And you're considering the surface of the sphere here, not the volume. But the qubit can be a mixture of anywhere on that surface. And so if the North Pole is a pure 0 and the South Pole is a pure 1 state, then these two angles, theta and phi, point to a particular location where the probability, the wave function, could be for that particular qubit. And the equation is down below, and it doesn't matter too much. It's just the geometry involved there. But just understand that qubits are a mix of quantum states here. And because there are so many more states available, not just the on and off switch, then potentially there's a lot more computation that can happen with a single qubit once you connect it to many other qubits. What you get is an exponential growth in the overall state space of the system. So it goes as 2 to the power n, where n is the number of qubits, rather than the multiplicative relationship of 2 times some number of bits. And I've used little n and big N to distinguish between the quantum computing and the classical computing. So you can imagine that for some small n, for the qubits, that could be less than the big N for the classical machine. And for certain algorithms, quantum computing could be faster than our fastest classical supercomputer. Now, you can implement quantum gates by taking 2 or more of these qubits, and the rotations on this block sphere, you rotate these angles, essentially represent the way that the quantum gate logic is implemented. It's different from the classical gate logic. But what you need to do is to have these qubits working together in some sense. So they have to be quantum entangled. That is, their wave functions have to overlap, be synchronized, be coherent. And you want to do that across a machine, hopefully with 100 of these qubits or 1,000 or many more than 1,000. And you want as many as possible of those to be entangled. And so what happens is you get them into an entangled state, you proceed with the computation, and it's inherently parallel. It's happening on all the qubits at once. And their wave functions are overlapping, it's connected. And then you get to what should be some kind of metastable terminal state, and then you do a readout of the answer. So let me give you an analogy. The kids game where the music comes on and the kids are told to dance around, and then the teacher, the dance instructor says, freeze. So at that point, you have a final state, that's the readout. It doesn't tell you what all the intermediate phases were and where all the kids were in between. You want them entangled or coupled. So maybe you are choreographing them. They have a routine. And so in general, they're kind of somehow connected to each other. Or you might even say they need to link arms and link hands. And so they're always connected that way. And then at the end, you freeze, you get a final state. Now, not all problem domains would benefit. So you're searching for those that have quantum advantage. And they're in areas like cryptography, search, optimization, machine learning. It may be able to help with AI problems, and quantum chemistry. Let's move to the next slide. So the big challenges are scaling and also which technology to build in. And there's no common transistor design at this point. We have a range of different technologies. Most of them require refrigeration to extremely cold temperatures, much, much less than 1 degree above absolute zero. In fact, they need to be at millikelvin, 1,000th of a degree or lower above absolute zero. And this applies to superconducting loops, or trapped ion designs, or neutral atoms designs. There are also designs that use photonics, and those may allow you to run at room temperature, which is a nice advantage for them. The big problem in scaling is fighting noise, and there are many sources of noise. There's vibration noise, thermal noise, electromagnetic noise, that's external interference, and then internal crosstalk, inside the circuits. So you want this coherent superposition across, some set of qubits, or hopefully the full machine. And you want that coherence to last for a long time. And right now, the temporal coherence for these systems is measured in microseconds. They can't even stay in this coherent entangled quantum state for a full second. In fact, Google is proud of achieving, with this Willow chip that they just announced, 100 microseconds, because that was 5 times better than their previous generation. That's 1/1000th of a second. Sorry, 1/10,000th. It's 1/10,000th of a second. So it's an extremely short time. And then you want to scale with physical qubit count and keep the spatial coherence even as the distances grow. And you may end up, having multiple chips and having to stack the chips. And so the distances are going to get greater both in qubit count and physically. You need to control and measure all that. And then the noise gets worse with more qubits, and the decoherence can get exponentially worse. So we're now in an era that's called noisy intermediate scale quantum. And we'll show in this next slide with this McKinsey roadmap the different kind of stages that the industry, the quantum computing industry, is seeking to reach. So there are 5 stages mapped out. Right now, we're really in the early stage, the first column, and trying to get into the late stage. So if you look at the top of that, you'll see that in the blue, for gate-based quantum computer, early stage is 100 gates. And with the blue dot in the late stage, it's 1,000 gates. And that's right where we are now. The Google machine is 100 gates. The IBM machine is about 1,100 gates, their latest. There are some other machines mentioned in the black dots, but they're not general purpose. They're more like an analog design. So they're not relevant. They can't run the algorithm that would crack the Bitcoin addresses. Now, if you go to the 4th column, you'll see this kind of shadowed area, this outline of a rectangle. And that shows where you need to get to for quantum computing. So you see that little blue dot at the top of that, that's 1 million qubits. And then you see at the bottom of that rectangle, breaking RSA cryptography. Now, there's a different cryptography that we care about, but they're both going to be attacked at around the same scale. So we're in this early late stage, 100 to 1,000 qubits, and there's a long way to go to get to 1 million qubits. Next slide. We can make a comparison with the first Intel microprocessor, which came out in 1971. That had 23 transistors, 500 to 1,000 usable gates. It had a clock that was less than 1 megahertz. So by comparison, this Willow chip, first of all, has to use very exotic materials in order to allow for superconducting to occur, even at very low temperatures. Things like niobium and tantalum, and there are quite a few other materials involved. We talked about the 105 qubits, and what they're able to run with that number of physical qubits is 1 to 2 logical qubits. And that amounts to 1 gate at most. So the first transistor had up to 1,000 usable gates. Quantum computing now, we're at 1 gate, or maybe a few on the IBM machine. And those gate times are 10 to 100 nanoseconds. And you can't directly say there's a clock for the whole machine, but it's in the range of 10 to 100 megahertz for the clock, which of course is very, very slow compared to microprocessors or to the ASICs that are used for mining. Now, they did get some substantial improvements in quantum coherency time, and they got better error suppression over prior generations. But in order to do that error correction, they had to create 2 7x7 arrays. That's 98 of the qubits out of the 105 that were all involved in making that 1 logical qubit. Now, what's the rate of progress? Well, we don't know. But we can look at what the historical progress has been and make some guesses about how it might go forward. IBM had 5 qubits in 2016. They now have 1,100. So that count has gone up faster than Moore's law. Google had 53 qubits 5 years ago. They've just doubled that. So that's slower than Moore's law, although they did do a better job of longer time for coherency and better error suppression. Rigetti Computing is another one of the major superconducting technology-based vendors. They've gone from 8 to 84 in 7 years. That's around a Moore's law rate. Roughly, you could say we're at Moore's law. If you look at this little inset graph, which comes from an introduction to quantum computing from another source, they show the sort of historical in the lower left, and they show a projection, Moore's law or faster. And then they show some curves for different algorithms. And the one that we're interested in is up around 1 million gates, because that's the one that's going to crack the cryptographic problem. So you can see that if we proceed at the Moore's law's rate, we're out in about past 2040. If we proceed, faster than Moore's law, then it could happen sooner, sometime in the 2030s. So that's really the kind of concern we need to have, but we do need to prepare for it. So let's go to the next slide. So there are 2 main potential problems for Bitcoin. The first is addresses. It's the most important. The second is hashing. But addresses could be broken with an algorithm called Shor's algorithm to break the private key of a public-private key pair. So once you get the public key, you run the Shor's algorithm on the quantum computer, and in some reasonable amount of finite time, it can be exponentially faster for large numbers, as we have with 256-bit keys. And a 256-bit key is 10 to the 77th possible combinations. But you get a million qubits and more than 1,000 logical qubits, that could be broken with Shor's algorithm. And the name of the cryptography is ECDSA for elliptic curve digital signatures. And Shor's originally was an integer factorization algorithm. It's been adapted for this elliptical curve logarithmic problem. Now there are 4 different kinds of addresses that are used on the Bitcoin blockchain. And the ones that present the most problem are the early addresses. And they use P2KP, which is a public-private key algorithm. But the problem is all of the public keys are stored on the blockchain. They're visible. And so that's the soft underbelly or the targets. And that would include Satoshi's coins, for example, and a lot of whale coins because they're early on, right? High value. So that's the first target-rich environment for quantum computing. The second one, which was mostly adopted into wallets by 2011, the updated algorithm appeared in 2010, but it was mostly adopted through 2011 into wallets, adds hashing. So that's why it's called P2KP-H. And so only a hash of the key is put into the block. However, if you then want to spin the UTXO, then you have to unhash it and expose the public key. So on the fly, it becomes vulnerable, it becomes visible. And there are a couple of other algorithms. The third one is safe. The fourth one has if you've got a taproot signature, and then there's some vulnerabilities there. The next one is hashing, and that's a different algorithm. It's called Grover's algorithm. And the question is, could quantum computers hash blocks faster than we can do with ASICs? The next slide from Ben Sigmund, and you can follow him. He's a good person to follow on this issue at Ben Sig, shows these 2 algorithms in a little more detail. And this table actually is in the Bitcoin improvement proposal that I'll talk about in a moment. So I think it was generated by the author of that proposal. We'll talk about him in a moment. So the first one is the digital signature, 256-bit. Shor's algorithm is the attack. About 2,500 logical bits are required. It means you're going to need millions of physical qubits. The ratio is about 100 to 1, potentially, with the Willow chip from Google. But they've got to demonstrate that at scale. They've only shown that works at a small scale, and they've got to make it scale up. And that's where the challenges come. So that undermines the private keys. The second one is the hashing algorithm. A double SHA 256 is used for all of the hashing generation. That's going to need at least 1,000 logical qubits, and again, millions of physical qubits. And what it does is it reduces the brute force problem. Not really drastically. It takes it from 2 to the 256 power to 2 to the 128th power. So yes, drastic in a relative sense. It does come down by a factor of 2 to the 128, but it's still quite expensive. The next slide is Grover's state of the art. Well, Grover's state of the art right now is 4 to 6 qubits. There was a paper written in 2022 that ran 5 and 6 qubits on a simulator. So they haven't actually run it on the IBM hardware. And the largest that's actually been run on hardware for Grover's algorithm is 4 qubits, logical qubits. So remember, we've got to get to 1,500. So that's not an immediate threat. I won't go through the details in the interest of time here, but our ASICs now run at a few terahashes per second. And the quantum computer today has a clock of 10 to 100 megahertz. If you had 1,500 qubits with today's clock, that would be enough to generate about up to 100 mega hashes per second. Well, 100 mega hashes is short of 200 terahashes, which one ASIC can do by a factor of 2 million times. So quantum computers, even if they were much faster than today, would have to then be again faster by another 2 million times. And in order to get to the million qubits, that's another factor of 10,000. And you add it all up, you need 34 doublings. And, that's 34 years if they're going twice as fast as Moore's law. And so that puts us into the second half of this century. And of course, ASICs are not standing still. Now, there's no reason in principle why one would not allow quantum computers to mine. But everything I've described would be one quantum computer trying to match one ASIC mining rig, right? And as we know, there are millions. So they could get into the mix, and if they're really fast, then the difficulty adjustment goes up, and the mining process would compensate in that way. So let's move back to Shor's algorithm that can crack the addresses. We need solutions, so we need quantum safe keys and addresses. And there is a Bitcoin improvement proposal from someone who calls himself Hunter Beast as a pseudonym on X, and their address on X is @CryptoQuick, so you can follow him. And the proposed solution is called P2QRH, so quantum safe with a hashing capability, although he's got multiple implementations, multiple algorithms. So he implements 4 different possible algorithms, so people would be able to choose potentially. But we'll have to see how this goes through the consensus and standardization problem. There has to be a lot of discussion. It's a brand new proposal. It just got its number less than 48 hours ago. So it's been assigned BIP 360. And, it's up on GitHub with some detail. It needs a lot of discussion on transition strategies because, of course, with everything, there's a solution. But which of these algorithms should be included? Should all 4 or 2 or 3? And some of them are more expensive than others. It is going to require larger block sizes. And I did listen to him speak on Fred Krueger's space about 24 hours ago and present this. And they may need block sizes in the range 10 megabits to 16 megabits. However, they can offload a lot of that in the same way that SegWit offloaded addresses. This standard proposes to do something similar, to offload that from the core blockchain. The next slide shows that indeed there are already solutions for post-quantum cryptography. These are federal information processing standards since this August. And the process is managed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and they received many proposals. They've gone through many stages of review and refinement, and so far have accepted these 3. And actually, what we have is 2 address generation methods and 1 key encapsulation method. And they use something called lattice-based cryptography in one case, and there's something called Sphinx, which is a hash-based scheme with integer factorization involved. So 2 of those are standards that go into the BIP's proposal, and there are a couple of others that are in there as well. So we can start to wrap this up with some observations by the experts. David Marcus says that there's been a lot of FUD about this. First thing first, when quantum computation hits, banks and nations' national security secrets and much more will become vulnerable before Bitcoin will, because those will be, in most cases, even higher value targets. Adam Back says millions of physical qubits all entangled is what the quantum experts say. We're 5 orders of magnitude away. And at the same rate of progress of the last 25 years, it could be 50 years away. I think that maybe is a little optimistic. I think we need to plan for, the possibility of exponential breakthroughs. We can use AI systems to design quantum computing systems now. Technology does advance in exponential fashion. There can be breakthroughs. So we need to worry about this within the next decade. It's probably not going to be an implementation problem in 5 years, but we ought to get our act together in the next 5 years so that we can protect against something that's going to happen 10 years from now. Mara said Willow has just 105 qubits, and according to physicist Sabine Hassenfelder, practical applications are about 1 million qubits away and decades from reality. The requirement jumps to 13 million qubits. You see different numbers here. That's for the RSA 2048 bits. We've got fewer bits involved in a different algorithm. So, but we're probably a few million. Ben Sigmund, who I mentioned, has been tracking this. He says, transition to quantum-safe cryptographic algorithms, lattice-based or hash-based, sooner than later is desirable. Accelerate the adoption of quantum-resistant models, such as the BIP 360 that CryptoQuick is proposing and shepherding, and stay informed on developments, which you can do by following Ben Sig and CryptoQuick, and to some degree myself and others. Another person that's good to follow is Ol Lehman, and he goes into some more detail about the Willow processor. We've covered a lot of this. You'll notice in the upper right, again, the Sphinx signature implementation, the lattice-based, hash-based signature schemes, and zero knowledge proof layers are the different kinds of hardening that can be done. Better doors, better locks, better walls for the Bitcoin citadel.
Absolutely. And we've had Ben Sigmund on to discuss early Satoshi emails. That was a fantastic episode that people really enjoyed. And we'll try to get Ben back on soon in January to discuss this as well. Stephen, it sounds like your overall message is that while the technology has a long way to go, there are some early addresses that will have the most vulnerabilities and that we should be investigating. We should be testing BIP 360. And I hope that someone like yourself will be contributing to the discussion as we try to sort out Bitcoin's future. Can you bottom line it for us? Is Bitcoin safe holistically? If your answer is yes, does it assume that programmers and developers are going to be making or instituting a block size increase and then new private public key quantum safe algorithms? And can you just bottom line it for us, please?
Yeah. And I think your initial thumbnail was right, but basically we should do something. Now, individually, you could work around, because if somebody produces a quantum safe wallet, then you can just move your coins to a quantum safe wallet, right? But, we understand that people come to Bitcoin with all levels of sophistication in the use of the technology, and that it should be desirable to have something that's a more complete and universal solution. And some of the difficulties come in how to implement that, because if you decide that you're just going to migrate large swaths, say as an extreme case, that you decided to move everything that has a P2KP signature, P2PK signature, before 2011, that would be a long migration process. That could take months. And is it the right thing to do? If there are stranded coins, if people have passed away, coins are lost, is that really the right thing to do ethically? So all that discussion needs to happen. But in a minimum, we know that there are quantum safe algorithms that can be implemented for any wallets that people want to hold, any future addresses, and that people can move coins from less safe addresses to these highly quantum safe addresses once you implement something like BIP 360. There may be other proposals that come out. I think there's a lot of attention on it now. There has to be a lot of discussion. I'm hopeful that it's going to be sorted out in the next year or two, and that we'll see implementation within, 2-3 years. And we do have that amount of time so that we can do it right. We will probably have to see larger block sizes. And this proposal tries to do it in an efficient way, the same way that it was done with SegWit, to externalize a lot of that, witness information separately. So I would say people should track, follow, and but not worry too much, because there's time. It's probably a decade before anything even attempts to be attacked.
Let's move on to Bitcoin's price now. So Bitcoin trading just below $100,000 as of this recording, got as high as about 107, 108,000. Now, Stephen, give us your outlook on the Bitcoin price relative to the power law, because the last time we had you on, we explored the mathematics behind Bitcoin's power law, that it's not an exponential increase in price, but that it's a different type of mathematical relationship that we see more often in nature. That power law model, or your estimation, had Bitcoin heading above $1 million in the 2030s. So give us an update. Has the price advanced, surprised you in any way, fit in with your model? And I know that, as we discussed, the model is not a price projection. It's not a prediction. It's just context for the way that Bitcoin has grown looking backwards, and an extrapolation of that growth looking forwards using a very well-known and understood mathematical model. So this speculation, or our analysis of the Bitcoin price with relation to Stephen's analysis and the power law model, it's not a prediction or a projection. So with that being said, Stephen, go ahead.
Well, it's a trend that has a large amount of volatility. Volatility is coming down. The power law is between the fifth power and the sixth power, but it's closer to the sixth power. Now, you know what squares are, you know what cubes are, and the sixth power is just take the cube and then take the square, right? So if you double the time, then it would go up by 2 to the 6. That's a factor of 64. And the age right now is 16 years. So another 16 years on the power law trend would be another factor of 64, a little less, more like 50. And that would take 100,000 up to 5 million, right? So that's the long-term trend if the power law holds. And right now, the standard deviation for the entire history is about 0.3 in a log 10 terms, which is a factor of 2. So it's a factor of 2 up or down, but that's one standard deviation. It's more than that if you go, to z of +2, if you go up 2 standard deviations when you have bubbles. And we know that the distribution is skewed. So it's skewed right tail, right? We spend more time between z +1 and z +2 than we do below z of -1. In fact, we spend very little time of z of -1. That tends to be a support level. And it tends to lie around the same place as the 208-week moving average, the 4-year support level. Right now, we're close to fair value. On a generalized least squares, that has a 5.89 or about a 5.9 power law index, and it has a fair value of 91,000. So we're only a little above that. And the trend growth is about 43% per year for the next year. But that gradually slows over time because it's not compound annual growth that's constant. It's rapid growth that's gradually slowing and whose volatility is gradually coming down. I expect the volatility in this epoch to be closer to 0.2 in the logarithm. which is a factor of 1.6 for one sigma, one standard deviation, rather than a factor of 2. So it has come down, and each epoch it has come down. So if you think that we're in the relatively early stages of a bubble, and that bubble takes us well into 2025, because these things happen quasi-periodically about 4 years apart, then you would say, well, if you go halfway into the year, we would be up another 20% on the mean trend. And then if you go up, one sigma above that, it's another factor of 1.6, right? So that would take you close to 200,000 for a one standard deviation excursion. And above that, if it goes up to 1.5 or more.
So that's just so I understand really quickly, that you're saying to the middle of next year, a 20% increase on the 91,000 level. Correct. that you said. So somewhere into the 100, between 110, 120, and then 1.6 times that. So that's where you get 60% of 120 and round up to 200, right?
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead, continue,
and,
please.
We've seen these prior ones go up to around 2 sigma, right? But they just touch it, and that's it. You don't.
And
you don't
2
spend a lot of
sigma
time
would
there.
be how many times?
Well, it would be the square of 1.6.
Square.
So it's a factor of 2.56, right? So you take that off of 110,000, and then you're 275, 280 as a possible maximum, but there's no guarantee of hitting that. It becomes less and less probable as you get above 1.5 sigma.
Sure. So to bottom line that, the power model suggests that by the middle of next year, the fair value using historical data of Bitcoin's price should be in the low 100s, and that if we were to expect Bitcoin to see bubble-like behavior in 2025, that the price could go for anywhere from 200 to beyond, and that would be well within context of a one standard deviation move beyond where its power law fair value is. So Stephen, can you just bottom line that for us and wrap up your message on your Bitcoin price expectations, and maybe even include any of your fundamental analysis here, as we've clearly entered a bullish phase of Bitcoin's price here in the last quarter of the year?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are question marks around liquidity, right? And liquidity flows. And right now we've had a little bit of pullback. And so it's very interesting. Perhaps you saw the chart that Michael Howell put out very recently, which is a power law correlation between his global liquidity index and Bitcoin price, right? And it's very steep. It's almost a power law to the 10th power. It's above the 9th power. So it is quite sensitive to liquidity, and that tells you how it's going to move around within, say, -1 sigma up to about 0.2 sigma. So I think that's one of the largest uncertainties. There are many others, obviously, with things like the strategic Bitcoin reserve as a possibility, and we know Michael Saylor is going to be in there every week or every 2 weeks. So that's fundamentally important. It depends a lot on what, it's spreading. It's certainly spreading to other corporations, right? More and more. We've got more than 60 corporations on the list. I think we're in the favorable part of the cycle. I expect it to at least last through the middle of the year and into the fall, maybe. And we'll have to see how things shape up.
We will, and that's why at the Bitcoin layer, we try to combine power law analysis, liquidity analysis. We have Michael Howell on, we have our own liquidity index, and combine it with fundamental analysis, of course, watching the strategic Bitcoin reserve potential, what's happening in Washington and beyond. Stephen Perrenod, PhD in astrophysics and Bitcoin mathematician. Thank you so much for joining us today, and again, sharing with us your expertise in a field of quantum cryptography and quantum computing that we couldn't even dream of beginning to understand on our own. So thank you. Definitely check Stephen out on X. His handle is @money-or-debt. Stephen, anything else that you want to leave people with?
No, I just want to thank you for having me on again, Nik. It's been a great pleasure.
Absolutely. And we'll catch you guys next time. Have a great Christmas and Happy New Year.